In today's video, hopefully we'll be able to answer that dying question that we all have as to what happens to us when we pass. However, to get the whole picture as to when this process happens and what represents a dispensational period, you're going to need a little bit of historical context. A dispensation will be defined in today's video as being the action of distributing something. More precisely, we'll be discussing the process of distributing and adjudicating souls, according to the Urantia Book. For those of you that are new to the text, perhaps a closer but yet still inaccurate term you should be forming in your minds is the Christian rapture, where there is the belief that there will be a second coming of Jesus Christ that will transport believers directly to heaven. Lucky for you, the Urantia Book has a detailed analysis and historical accounts of these processes and a play-by-play explanation of this system. And yep, for those of you that haven't picked up on my voice inflection, there have been 3 dispensations so far, with the last being very similar to what Christians would believe would be transpiring with the approval of our Creator Son, Jesus Christ Michael. However, 189 3.3 indicates that the first major dispensation occurred at the time of the arrival of our planetary prince, the second during the time of our material sons, and the third signaled by the Urantia resurrection, the mortal transit of Jesus of Nazareth. Fun fact, as millenniums have passed and adjudications have persisted, more and more sleeping survivors have become candidates simply because of the increased endowment of the thought adjuster, or the fragment of God that resides inside each and every one of us and holds the experiential account of our entire life. However, even before our planetary prince, we really begin our story with Andon Infanta, who are the first God-knowing humans to be endowed by adjusters due to their merits, which was a process for receiving thought adjusters, which existed up until the time of the Pentecost. That's right, Adam and Eve were not the first humans on the planet. And no, they really weren't that human. However, with the outpouring of the Spirit of Truth since the Pentecost and a universe sovereign's desire to give everyone a fair shot, each person is now endowed with their own fragment of God until the time of judgment. So let's start from the beginning. Andon Infanta were the progenitors to the human race. They were the first beings to be recognized as primarily human and were the first to initialize the ascension process. In part, earlier attempts at a human, God-knowing species had not materialized on the planet that were receptive to all the adjudant mind spirits of our universe mother. These twins accomplished a great deal in their short 36-year lifespan, which includes making the first flint spear and creating fire utilizing a bird's nest. A detailed description of these events can be seen in my Andon Infanta video. Consequently, due to their heightened receptivity to these mind spirits, greater intelligence, and increased spiritual awareness, they were the first to be blessed with the potential for eternal life. These two were among the first humans to be transported to the higher Urantia planets on the first mansion world and the local system of Satania, serving with Urantia personalities who welcomed time-traveling pilgrims from Urantia. They are since known to have fused with their thought adjusters on Jerusalem, but are now allowed to travel to the first mansion world to serve as greeters to new ascenders. Andon Infanta was a very, very long time ago. We are talking almost 1 million years in the past. However, slightly more recently, in the deep antiquity of Urantia, long before the rise of civilizations, before the shaping of myths and the carving of symbols into stone, the world was visited by a being of extraordinary stature. This was Caligastia, who was our once planetary prince, dispatched from the higher realms to inaugurate the first great dispensation of Earth's spiritual history. This dispensation was very special, considering that this group of ascending mortals were part of the first mass judgment and ascension that our planet had ever seen. The world was young, its people scattered in primitive tribes, their languages unformed, and their rituals crude. Yet within them burned a spark of mind, a capacity for choice, and the latent hunger for meaning that welcomes a just arrival. It was onto this raw and untamed environment that Caligastia and his staff made their way, bearing the commission to guide humanity toward the first steps of civilization and the recognition of divine order. The coming of the prince was not a spectacle of thunder or fire, but a quiet implementation of authority. He was accompanied by a corps of 100 immortal beings, volunteers from higher worlds, who had agreed to serve on Urantia in materialized form. They received their immortal status by consuming the fruit of the Tree of Life, with cosmic energies that could only be absorbed by them and such material sons like Adam and Eve. These 100, drawn from diverse orders of celestial life, were incarnated into bodies that resembled those of primitive humans, yet were infused with superior vitality and wisdom. They became the staff of Caligastia, the nucleus of a new administration intended to uplift the planet both genetically, academically, and spiritually. Their headquarters was established in Dalmatia, a city constructed near the Persian Gulf, chosen for its central location along the early human migrations. Dalmatia was to be the first capital of Earth, a beacon of order and culture in a wilderness of confusion. The prince's mission was clear: to foster the growth of human society, to teach rudiments of agriculture, animal husbandry, science, and the arts of living together in peace. More importantly, he was to reveal the existence of higher realities, to plant the seeds of religion, morality, and law. The staff divided their responsibilities into 10 councils, each devoted to a sphere of human advancement: health, education, industry, government, and so forth. They taught the tribes how to domesticate animals, how to cultivate grains, and how to build dwellings that were more enduring than caves. They introduced the idea of family life being a sacred institution, elevating marriage and child-rearing into moral responsibilities rather than mere instincts. They sought to replace superstition with reverence for the unseen Father of all, teaching that the universe was governed by a benevolent source. For a time, progress was real. Dalmatia became a center of light, its walls enclosing schools, workshops, and temples. The tribes who came in contact with the prince's staff carried away new practices, new ideas, which slowly spread among the peoples. The beginnings of law were codified, the first moral codes articulated. And yes, this all happened in that region called Mesopotamia. And no, it's not a coincidence that writing and how we manage time originated in this region. Humanity was consequently slowly being nudged out of savagery into the dawn of civilization. It was a systemic approach awaiting the biological upliftment of the material sons, Adam and Eve, who would arrive generations later to uplift humanity yet further. However, this fragile experiment depended upon loyalty of the prince to his superiors, loyalty of the staff to their mission, and loyalty of the tribes to the teachings they received. And it was precisely this loyalty that would be tested in the most catastrophic way. After the collapse of the prince's administration and the ruin of Dalmatia, which is now underwater, Urantia drifted into confusion. Do you feel as if Dalmatia was synonymous with Atlantis? If that's your feeling, write so in your comments below. These tribes reverted to superstition, progress slowed, and the promise of civilization seemed lost. Yet the universe does not abandon its worlds. In the wake of rebellion, a new dispensation was prepared: the arrival of Adam and Eve, the material son and daughter sent to reestablish order and to uplift humanity through the infusion of the superior life strain and the teaching of divine ways. Their coming marked the second great chapter in the planetary story, a dispensation of hope, tragedy, and enduring legacy. Adam and Eve were not mortal beings. In fact, they were part of their own material son order, created to serve as biological uplifters on evolutionary worlds. More precisely, they were the sole creation of their father, Jesus Christ Michael, without the assistance of his universe mother consort. They were radiant, noble, and wise. embodying the harmony of spirit and matter. Fun fact, it was due to their slightly luminescent skin that began the iconography of the halo above one's head, symbolizing divinity. Apparently, they covered a majority of their bodies with clothing, with the exception of their heads, to reveal this otherworldly energy. So I apologize, everyone. I tried as best as I could when it came to making some of these videos to kind of show that radiant energy. But with AI, it's kind of wonky. And of course, artificial intelligence has a long way to go. The pair's mission was twofold: to establish a center of culture and worship that would radiate influence across the planet, and to blend their superior life plasm to that of the primitive races, thereby accelerating the human progress. They were to be the new leaders of Urantia, replacing the fallen prince, and to inaugurate a new age of advancement as spiritual ambassadors. Their arrival was not in secrecy, but in majesty. They descended to Urantia and established their headquarters in the Garden of Eden, a carefully prepared site located on a fertile peninsula extending into the eastern Mediterranean. The garden was a marvel of beauty and order, designed as a modern civilization. Its fields were cultivated, its orchards abundant, and its dwellings harmonious with nature. At the center stood a temple, the Temple of the Unseen Father, a place where humanity could learn reverence for the first source and center of all life. The garden was intended to be both a home for Adam and Eve and a school for the tribes, a living demonstration of higher ways. The pair's previous assignment before Urantia had them serving almost like universe scientists, although their mission on our planet was to be that of interbreeders and our spiritual prime ministers to our planetary prince, since they were among the few that could actually detect his spiritual presence. Adam and Eve began their mission with patience and wisdom. They taught agriculture, animal husbandry, crafts, and the arts of peace. The 7-day creation myth stems from the amount of time it took Adam and Eve to survey their Garden of Eden. They introduced new fruits and grains, improved methods of cultivation, and elevated the standards of living. They sought to instill morality, emphasizing family life, fidelity, and the sanctity of marriage. They taught that humanity was destined for greatness, that the Father of all cared for each and every soul, and that progress was possible through the cooperation and obedience to divine law. Their children born in the garden were to be the progenitors of a new hybrid race, blending their superior Adamic strain with the evolutionary peoples of Urantia. After the sorrow of Adam and Eve's default, Urantia entered into a long period of struggle. These tribes carried fragments of Eden's teachings, but myths of paradise lost and gods in conflict clouded the truth. Humanity wandered into spiritual confusion, worshiping nature, spirits, and tribal deities, while the memory of the Universal Father faded into obscurity. The world needed a new revelation, a fresh dispensation to rekindle the flame of faith and to prepare the way for a greater light. Consequently, the two previous dispensations of Caligostia and Adam and Eve had to do with the cultural advancement and abilities of the people. However, Jesus Christ's dispensation was honorary, since he was, after all, on our planet during this time. Since we already have enough videos for now for the life and teachings of Jesus, let's now fast forward to the Pentecost, where Christ Michael commanded his son, Gabriel, to give the order for our third major planetary dispensation. The story begins in 189, 3.1, when it indicates,
A little after 4:30 this Sunday morning, Gabriel summoned the archangels to his side and made ready to inaugurate the general resurrection of the termination of the Adamic dispensation on Urantia. When the vast host of the seraphim and the cherubim concerned in this great event had been marshaled in proper formation, the Urantia Michael appeared before Gabriel, saying, As my Father has life in himself, so has he given it to the Son to have life in himself. Although I have not yet fully resumed the exercise of universe jurisdiction, this self-imposed limitation does not in any manner restrict the bestowal of life upon my sleeping sons. Let the roll call of the planetary resurrection begin.
Then Gabriel ordered in 189 3.2,
By the mandate of Michael, let the dead of the Urantia Dispensation rise.
Consequent to this final order, the sleeping survivors who had been in a dormant state since the days of Adam and Eve, who had not yet been individually judged, were adjudicated in their spirit form, and if allowed to continue their ascension careers, found themselves in the resurrection halls of Masonia in a new material form. Surprisingly, for the few people that have their own unique pair of spirit guardians reaching the third spiritual circle, no dispensation is necessary. Your angelic friends, along with your thought adjuster, will place your spirit into a deep sleep. Your adjuster then makes its way to Divinington and Havona, and once it's indicated that you've been fully adjudicated and approved to move on to the next stage, you are immediately transported by your angelic team to your first world of assignment. In fact, in Book 113, Section 3, there is a whole section that covers death, where we will be briefly overviewing the spiritual, intellectual, and physical death that likely drew you to this video in the first place. In 112 3.2, we learn that soul death either can occur due to informed choice or more frequently are the consequences of a morally bankrupt individual in a chronic form of iniquity, which outcome must be a unanimous decision of your adjuster and attached seraphim. The adjuster is ordered to leave their host, and by all intents and purposes, that human no longer exists. Their human body, mind, and presence might continue, but these functions no longer represent a purpose or experiential record of any kind. This order is confirmed by universal censors and their reflective agents, with the final ruling of the administrators on Urvanton. As for intellectual death, this is where the adjutant mind spirit's ministry becomes disrupted due to a partial or full destruction of the human brain. If damage is permanent and irreparable, then your adjuster is dispatched once more to their home planet. As for material or physical death, a state that we all must eventually suffer, with a great deal of hopefulness, any moral choices this person might have made previous to their deceased or vegetative state will be used to determine if eternal life potential is sought after. For many sleeping survivors that will be further adjudicated or judged during a dispensation, this is seen in part as a mercy ministry that Jesus taught us, where every effort will be used to offer eternal life to as many sleeping survivors as possible. At Divinington, the existential memory transcription of an ascender's career will be taken, and if the mortal is chosen for possible eternal survival, then that soul will be safeguarded by their destiny guardian. It is, after all, a reunion of the adjuster, and of course that soul that truly resembles the surviving personality of the ascender that is reconstructed by your attending angel. Tragically, upon a person's death, your adjuster temporarily loses your personality and retreats back to a pre-personal state of being. As a not-so-fun fact, we learn in 112 3.7 that ascenders are not permitted to send messages back to their loved ones, and that is the policy throughout the universes to forbid such communication during a specific period of dispensation. When it comes to universal censors, they are able to gain an abstract or portion summary of an ascender's life via the thought adjuster that makes it possible for certain ascenders to bypass their next dispensation period and make their way immediately to the mansion or higher worlds that most of us will be visiting. If you'll be joining the other sleeping survivors that have more of a murky or stagnant past, then will such an adjuster find a new temporary assignment until you are released from Urantia. If you have indeed lived a relatively righteous life or have some sort of special destiny, then upon reaching the third spiritual circle, your destiny guardian and adjuster will submit your case immediately to the universal censors and reflective spirits on Aversa, who will review your life in its entirety. You will then immediately be dispatched to the resurrection halls of your first mansion world. There, you'll be given a suitable Urantia energy pattern form found in 112 5.17. Unfortunately, many of your past memories, ones that no longer serve a cosmic purpose, will perish with your human brain. for most individuals who don't become mighty messengers. This means that most life memories will have to be reviewed at a later time, or become assimilated once you make your way to the eternal Isle of Paradise. However, for everyone of survival potential, relationships are never considered dispensable, and you'll have sort of a fuzzy recollection of those in which you have once known in the flesh, as soon as you awaken in the resurrection halls of another world, in another body, and at another distant time. As for future dispensations, they're usually symbolized by the arrival of a paradise sun, such as an avenal sun. They typically arrive in 49.5.25.
When the intellectual and ethical progress of the human race has reached the limits of evolutionary development, there comes an avenal son of paradise on a magisterial mission. And later on, when the spiritual status of such a world is nearing its limit of natural attainment, the planet is visited by a paradise bestowal sun.
However, Urantia is a very special planet, one in which we'll certainly see our Creator Son, Christ Michael, once more, perhaps even conducting one more dispensation for us, being our technical planetary prince. Thank you again for watching today's video, your continued support, and I'll see you on the next one.